Hi, everyone. Our mother Wilma and the whole gang would like to thank you for coming today and for the great stories and very kind condolences you've been sharing about our dad, Boyd Caldwell. In particular, we would like to thank the care team that has been surrounding Dad for the last month and a half, and that's at the Brockville General Hospital. Sorry, Mum, his new girlfriend, Ashley. Boyd, the PSW, who made Dad so comfortable and gave him spa treatment. The ER team in palliative care, Kelly from Bayshore, and the Ontario Health at Home team. The Department of Veterans Affairs has been phenomenal and supportive to Dad throughout the year, so we want to thank them as well. And of course, Barclays Funeral Home, the entire team has been just wonderful. Today, we also want to thank Father John Lavelle, I call him Father Honey, for his guidance and leadership today in the structure he's given us for this service. And finally, we really want to thank the Brockville Legion Branch 96 folks who did such an honorable job at the beginning of this service. And we hope to see you all between 5 and 7 at the Legion. But really, we want to thank all of you in particular. We're so grateful. And in our sharing today, we really didn't know where to begin. As you know, Dad was one of a kind. They broke the mold on January 1st, 1934. He was such a proud New Year's baby and always said that Nanny and Grandpa planned it that way. But really, how do we share memories or adequately capture 92 years of a full, well-lived life of adventure sports and family? Here you see Dad when he got home from his first hospital stay just a few weeks ago, and you can see the joy he is feeling returning home. So how do we capture all of this? And we realized that even generative AI couldn't help us with this one. So these 5 photos tell you some of the most important chapters in Dad's beautiful life. Firstborn to Evie and Bud Caldwell, proudly serving in the Royal Canadian Navy from age 17 to 22, a baseball coach for over 50 years, and of course the best father in the history of fathers, and husband to our mom for almost 70 years. We feel you all know Dad for these chapters of his life, and we hope the obituary also filled in some of the blanks as well. And so today, our aim is to share anecdotes and insights about Dad that go a little deeper. And so we're going to share some stories that touch, again, on Dad's sense of humor, which is no surprise, but also talk about his love of learning music and the arts, and expand on who Dad was as a sportsman. He really was into sports of all kinds and contributed in many ways. And he also provided for his family every step of the way and was a magnet and support to all of us, has always been that way through the highs and the lows. So let's start on the easy part. When Dad retired, he delivered service vehicles for Toyota. And if you want to hear about the time he found a human toe on the side of the 401, talk to us at the Legion later. So Dad got to tell his jokes while delivering service cars to Toyota customers. And he also finally had time to spend at his favorite haunts for socializing, including Tate's Bakery and the Thousand Islands Mall. And countless times, each of us has heard something that goes a little bit like this. Hey, I ran into your dad the other day. And when I asked what he was up to in his retirement, he said, without hesitation, table dancing at the St. Lawrence Lodge. And Dad was also very health conscious. You may not have known that he was always into eating fresh fruit and vegetables and other healthy food, for example. And his commitment to health also included regular trips to the dentist. And very importantly, he always assured us that he had been kind during the visit because, and I quote, dentists have fillings too. So another side of Dad we want to share is his love of learning music and the arts. Dad was a lifelong learner. He only watched nonfiction television and documentaries. And again, here's a little story. If you want to hear about the time Dad bought a book on anti-gravity, again, ask us at the Legion later. Dad was an avid fan of music and really all of the arts and live performances. And he and Kelly and Marty especially shared a lot of great conversations about music. For example, Dad also really loved Cirque du Soleil. And in that photo that you see, Dad is watching a Cirque du Soleil show in virtual reality. And he was always into trying new things like that. So Dad also included us in his love of live performances. For example, we all remember piling into the car and heading up Highway 16. That's Highway 16, not the 416, to the National Arts Center in Ottawa, almost like the Clampetts. And we would all head into the NAC to see these amazing musicals, like A Chorus Line, for example. And one time, Dad got us these really great seats at the NAC to see his favorite comedian, Victor Borga, who was also a great pianist. So once again, we headed down the highway and we, this time, clambered into our amazing seats near the front of the auditorium. And soon after, wouldn't you know it, a very tall man was in the front row the row right in front of us, and was walking along the aisle, and yes, he settled right directly in front of Dad. So Dad, of course, could not see Victor Borga, and at some points, not even the stage. This guy was so tall. So we all were like, oh boy, what's going to happen here? And Dad just paused and took a really long, deep, exasperated breath and leaned over to us and said, figures I have to sit behind a praying mantis. Okay, so the third theme is about Dad being an avid sportsman, really of all kinds, and that includes player, umpire, and super fan. Most of you know him as coach, but he also played a role in many other ways. And we are all so proud of him and Mom being inducted into the Brockville Sports Hall of Fame in 2014. Together, they have touched hundreds of lives in more than 50 years of volunteerism with sports, from T-ball all the way up to the bunnies. And Dad took teams to the Canadian Championships 3 times. And of course, our brother Steve Pickles Caldwell was on the 1971 team that won the Canadian Little League Championship and went to Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And so in addition to coaching, we wanted to share 3 other sports roles he played. And we will start with player. And this picture is of Dad out on Charles Street playing catch with one of us. And I hope you notice the Expos hat that he's wearing. So Dad, as a youngster, played fastball, not baseball. And you might be surprised to learn that Dad did not see a lot of playing time. In fact, he rode the Pines quite a bit and got to know his teammate, Wally White, pretty well, because Wally also did not see a lot of action on the field. During one intense game toward the end of the season, Dad and Wally, together in their final position on the bench, Dad started to try to get his coach's attention. He kept calling out, "Coach! Coach!" And his coach was on third base during the game. He was doing his job, giving signals, you name it. And Dad kept calling out to him from the bench. And so the coach ignored Dad initially, but he just couldn't do so over time because Dad did not give up. So finally, the coach said, "Caldwell, what the heck do you want?" Dad said, "Oh, hey, Coach, Wally and I just wondered if the team was planning to get together at the end of the season." And the coach, who was about to lose his mind, shouted, "Why the heck are you asking that, Caldwell?" And Dad said, "Well, Wally and I would just like to get to know some of the other players." And now a little bit about Dad's role as an ump. We can't emphasize enough how much time and effort Dad and Mom put into local sports. Mom, of course, did a ton of things behind the scenes, including announcing, scorekeeping, and calculating the stats. And Dad often volunteered to fill in where he was needed. And that included umping home plate or the bases. So during the Bunnies weekend tournament with some American teams, Dad volunteered to ump third base when the original ump had to cancel at the last minute. So it was a really tight game, and towards the end there happened to be a not so close play at third base. Dad made a not so great call that meant that the player from New York State was called out, and the coach from the New York team went crazy. He started shouting at Dad and then actually ran onto the field to get up close and personal. And Dad just stood there patiently with this placid look on his face while the coach got everything off his chest. And finally, when the coach paused, Dad said, "Buddy, you think that was a bad call? You should have seen the one I made last week." And of course, Dad was a great big fan of both the Expos and the Habs. He and Mom went regularly to Montreal, and as much as possible, they brought us with them. And in 1969, Dad and Mom took their 3 little boys you see there on the screen, Steve, Marty, and Dan, as well as Mom's little brother Jack, to an Expos baseball game in Montreal at beautiful Gerry Park. On the ride down to Montreal, Marty kept saying he wanted to meet Jean Beliveau, who, of course, was a star hockey player for the Habs. Dad and Mom kept trying to correct him, saying, "He's not going to be at a ball game, Marty." But that didn't stop him. So, can you guess who they ran into at Gerry Park and who actually gave Marty an autograph? Yes, Jean Beliveau. And as luck would have it, Hank Aaron was there too and gave an autograph as well. And we've all had some epic moments with Dad in Montreal, and he was never shy to call out to famous people that we would see there, including Donald Sutherland and Tim Raines. Sometimes Dad was even featured on TV. For example, when he accidentally poured his beer on the person sitting in front of him while he was trying to catch a fly ball in the stands. And sorry, Dad, we know that's not one of your favorite memories, and really, what a waste of beer. Okay, so the fourth and second last side of Dad that you may not have known about was all of the extra jobs he used to take to support his family. And yes, that's in addition to working full-time and at least one other part-time job he had the entire time, which was changing natural gas charts. And, of course, baseball coaching and being an awesome son, father, and husband. So one extra job was as a school bus driver. And so Dad is known by many dozens of kids around Brockville as Bullet. And we suspect that this nickname was down to his love of, let's call it, adventure when he had others in a vehicle with him, especially going over train tracks. So as Bullet, Dad would regularly tell us stories about the kids he picked up and dropped off, and their parents too. He really did love a lot of those kids. And their parents often thanked Dad for waiting for their little guy or little girl longer than he really had to. He delayed the bus for those kids. And at the end of the school year, Dad would take a busload of kids to Dairy Queen for a treat. And here you see Lisa Mounier, one of Bullet's kids, who became very close friends over the years with Dad. And clearly, Dad loved people. And that brings us to our fifth and final side of Dad that we want to share, family. Dad was simply a truly fun and funny, kind supporter of us all. And he was never shy to be a little bit silly, although he never liked me to share these photos widely. They just show a side of him that you probably sensed he had. That was just so much fun to be around. So Dad's love of family also included his grandkids, who have all had the pleasure of falling asleep on Dad's chest. And you know, Dad always insisted on having popsicles, ice cream, and other treats at the house for his grandkids, as well as the neighborhood kids who used to strike it rich, especially when Dad saw them out on Charles Street on a hot, sunny summer day. So, with all that you know about Dad, you can imagine what our life was like as his kids. And though it may surprise you to know that some of us were into partying, Dad was rarely fooled by our efforts to sneak in at night after a night of, let's call it, shenanigans. And Kim reminded me of this story. That in fact, Dad would sometimes be waiting in the dark when one of us was trying to climb into the family room window at the back of the house. And what do you think he was waiting to do? So, in the pitch black darkness, at just the right moment when one of his kids was halfway in the window, Dad would bark like a wild dog. And then, of course, he would fall on the floor laughing while we recovered. And that's just one small example of his thoughtful, silly, fun, and nonstop, unconditional love. And Dad also loved all of our friends, and Marty wanted to share a little story about when he was going to catch a train to get him to the airport and eventually out west, and he was traveling with his friend Jimmy Fikes. So it was the middle of the night. His train left really early, and Dad, when he took him over to the Fikes' house, Jim's mother Ruby came out, and Dad stood there for about 15 minutes and just had one of those classic conversations that Dad always had, looking you in the eye, making you feel heard and seen and important, and was just really a kind person to Ruby and, of course, Jim before taking them to the train station. Okay, so you may know that our brother Steve Pickles Caldwell died about 25 years ago at the age of 41. It devastated all of us, especially his daughter Laura, and of course Mom and Dad. It really changed all of us. And the last story we want to share is of Dad's unconditional love, because this story really captures who Dad is as a father and who we are as a family because of Dad. So it was kind of our first year of mourning at 35 Charles was pretty tough, but also, as I said, we all came together after that devastating loss. And really, it's because of how we were raised by Mom and Dad. We all rallied together as a family and just supported one another through that really dark time. And that year, I had come home from overseas to study for a year in Toronto, which actually in the end was pretty fortunate, considering what we were all going through. I ended up, feeling even closer to my brothers and sisters as well as Mom and Dad. And it was one of those bittersweet aspects of our year of mourning after we lost Steve. So I was even lucky enough to go on a road trip down east with Mom and Dad. And really, as a family, we tended to spend more time together either way. But at the end of that school year, I finished up with my own schooling and was preparing to return overseas. And on the day of my flight to Turkey, I was upstairs packing my bags when I heard Dad coming up the stairs. I was a little embarrassed because I was already emotional, of course, because of the year we had had. So Dad came upstairs and handed me an American Express card that he had ordered for me and said, "Rosie, I don't want you to go without. If you need anything in an emergency situation, especially, just use this card." And that was Dad in a nutshell, always taking care of us. And afterward, Mom and Dad and I arrived to the airport, our traditional 3 hours ahead of my flight, because we always wanted to grab lunch together before I had to take off. But at that time in August 2001, I forget what had actually happened internationally, but there had been some kind of security breach at an airport. And so the airport in Montreal had changed all of its procedures that next day. So when I went to check in at the airport, the clerk told me that I actually had to check in immediately and actually step over the luggage conveyor belt and go with my luggage all the way to the main flight area. I would have to leave right then and there. There would be no possibility for Mom and Dad and I to have lunch or even a normal goodbye. So naturally, I started to cry. And I turned and saw that Mom also had tears streaming down her face. And so I kind of wanted to argue with the airline clerk. So when I turned back to her, I saw that she was staring wide-eyed at Dad. And Dad also had tears in his eyes. And that was very, very unusual. So we all kind of froze. There was this long pause and quite an awkward silence, which Dad then broke when he said, "I'm not crying because she's leaving. I'm crying because she has my credit card." So that kind of captures who Dad has always been for us. And Dad, we are crying because you're leaving. You left us with so much to live by. Just like this note you wrote very recently. Your mood sets the weather. Pick sunshine. We will try, Dad. And life will never be the same without you. Thank you, Dad, for everything. You're the best man we have ever known. Fly high, and we love you.